Hey everyone, for this lecture we're going to be doing female gestures, or just gesture drawing in general, but we're doing the female body first. So gesture drawing is very important for figures, especially anime, because it shows the movement of the body and it makes your drawing look more presentable. So the more dynamic or the more like flowy your gesture is, the better your drawing will look. So a lot of what we look for in a gesture is the gesture line, or the S line, and when it comes to women it is more prominent because it is just what's more appealing to look at. So you have the head here, and then what's following is the S line. So that is kind of like an S shape. However, which direction, you can already kind of tell that every pose that's dynamic has, or the more that looks more graceful, the pose that looks more graceful has an S shape. So we can find one here, and that's a gesture line. We can find one here, just a slight one. This one is not very prominent, but it still has that kind of, you still want to find that S curve, and it's like still slight because you have the chest going this way and the hips going that way. So in a way it kind of creates that S shape. Now this one is very prominent. You can already see it when you have the head here, and then you can already just see that curve just, you know, flying by, but like, whew, you know. So that is what you want to look for whenever you draw the pose. Now I would suggest you guys do live drawing, like life drawing. Life drawing classes are definitely like amazing, especially if you go to like one of those workshops, like figure drawing workshops. I'm pretty sure that there's some nearby wherever you live. But those are really important because you can focus things on 3D, and you know, you guys can just see how the gesture poses are in real life. For this case, we're gonna go with 2D because we don't really have a live model, and I chose people with, or women with, more skin tight clothing, like in a bra or a leotard, because we want to see the whole thing, the whole body, even while, you know, covering their genital areas. But yeah, we want to show the curve as much as possible without having much baggage. So the baggier the clothing, you don't really see the figure very much. So that's why we go for a more thinner kind of line, or a thinner kind of build, not build, but clothes when it comes to models. So let's get started. I'm going to start with this top left one right here, and actually let's go with the more easier one. Let's go with this one here, the bottom left. So I'm going to take this and enlarge it. We're going to do 4 gestures, and I really highly suggest you guys take 4 poses like these, or you can even use the poses that I have, you know, now, and use them as reference to draw along with me. Don't mind the barking, that's my dog. So anyways, so let's get started with the gesture. So we always want to start with the head, and the head is a circle, and you curve it down to an egg shape. Now after that, you want to divide the face, or the head, into 2, and think of it as kind of like, and this is very important, you always want to include this, because this kind of shows depending on your direction of the head. So the kind of direction of the head is very different from, especially on the eye line. Let me just add that here. We're going to add the eye line. The eye line is also very important because you want to, so the direction of where your eye or the face is facing, or the head is facing, sorry. So it could face in this direction, or very different, could be in this direction. So you can see that the eye line shows a different direction each time it's presented, so you always want to keep that in mind. But in this case, she's facing straight forward, so there's not much of a, you know, there's not much of a movement in the head for this because it's a very standard pose. So now let's start with the gesture. Now we want to capture the S line, so I'm just going to do that now the best I could. Just kind of get a nice gist of it. Doesn't have to be super accurate, but it should be pretty close. So in a way, the body also ends here. It could be longer, but it's just an estimate. So now we have this line blocked in. We're going to put in the simple shapes as we did earlier in the previous video. So the neck is symbolizing this line is symbolizing the neck. We're going to thicken that later. And now let's go with the rib cage. Now the rib cage isn't too big or too small. It isn't this small. It isn't this big. You want it medium sized. Make sure it's not too big compared to the head. And then what I like to do is kind of give it that rib cage look, which kind of reminds, you know, if you look at your own rib cage, or not really look, but if you look at a regular skeleton, they have this kind of curved shape here. Here's a sternum, this caged look. And you want to emphasize that with that oval shape. You can even see her rib cage that's like kind of over here. So let's make a good guess on, get accurate. So her rib cage is a bit twisted. It's a bit tilted actually. So keep that in mind. And then let's mark out her pelvis. Now her pelvis is signified in, or symbolized with a box. Now this box can tell if this box is facing down, if the pelvis is facing downward, like this, facing upward, or facing to the side. In this case, it's kind of a standard form. So it's kind of almost like a bit of a tilted box in a way. You can kind of see where her hips start going in a certain direction, like this way, so the pelvis is tilted that way. So you want to make the box tilting this direction to show her hip movement. And you can kind of make out the top of the box a little bit. So I'm going to just add that right there. So now that we have our rib cage and our pelvis, we can connect this. And by connecting it, we can draw the neck. Now the neck is simplified by a cylinder. Now you want to start connecting the neck, the pelvis, no, sorry, with the rib cage and then the pelvis. So you want to have this kind of flow to it. So once that's connected, then you can move on to with the leg. Now the legs I like to just draw using simple lines. Another one with the other leg. The other line with the other leg. And I want to indicate the shoulders as well. Now in this case, you don't really need to draw the shoulders because I want you guys to follow form rather than, you know, like exact accuracy. We're not here to copy the gesture, we're here to study the form and how it moves and the forms within it. So you kind of want to just make sure that your gesture is as natural as possible rather than copying to the T, because if you copy to the T, it makes it way too stiff. And the good thing about gesture drawing is that you can also, if it looks too stiff, the pose itself, you can exaggerate a little bit. Like you can even turn this even more to have a more S-line shape. But that's all up to you. That's the artist's kind of point of view. So you can see me like indicating where the shoulders are, but not exactly drawing them. Then you can kind of thicken the legs a little bit. Make sure you draw the calves, the thighs. Now the reason why we're doing this gesture first is because we're going to put these into simple shapes later and then build them out in boxes. So we're going to be filling these out with with simple shapes so it can help us learn more. So don't really try anything super complex yet. Choose simpler poses like standing poses and run with the direct S-line shape so it's easy. So here's the first pose. That is not too bad. So yeah, let's move on to the next one following the same order. So now let's go with the second hardest pose, which is this one. This is at a more of an angle, this is more of a standard pose, but more of a 3/4 view, so this is a little bit more challenging. Now when it comes to 3/4 view, this is also very important for the center line of the head. You want to start with the head, and like the head, you kind of want to show a mask. So you can see that the mask is tilting this way, and the eyes kind of looking towards you. So you want the line to be rather straight. And then you see the jawline curve upward. Make sure you don't make it connect to the head right over here, but it's more like your jaw is sort of like this. Your skull, if you notice that the jaw does not touch at the back, or else that's very wrong, because that just doesn't exist that way. So you want to indicate that jawline, and then slowly have it curve outward towards the head. And now, like earlier, we want to find the S shape. So have the neck in this direction because it's kind of tilting inward. So you also want the neck to be tilting inward. Draw the rib cage. Draw the S line. So the S line is similar to just having the neck and the chest being kind of tucked inward. Tucked out. That was more outward actually. And then the leg or the hip area is going for this direction. So it's pushing outward. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention when it comes to the S line as well as the gesture is that you want to find the weight of the figure. So the weight of this figure is this front leg. It's straight down, and you want to capture that in your gesture as well. So it's straight, and this is kind of like distributing the weight from the back. That's why this leg is in front. So what you want to do for this leg or this weight here is that you want to kind of draw a straight line to emphasize weight so that she's actually resting on it rather than just floating in the air. So now let's go on with the rib cage. Rib cage is slightly outward. Oval, and then kind of just like give it a surface area, flat surface. And the pelvis is always a bit of more of a difficult stretch. It's best if you know perspective. If you know perspective, it's a lot easier to determine where the pelvis is and also all that stuff. So here we have a box, and this pelvis is turning this way. So the box is also on the side because you can sort of see the side view of the leg. So the box will look like this. And it's also facing downward because you don't really see anything above her legs or her butt. You kind of just see what's going downward. So you can see a bit of the top of the box. Box facing downward at a side direction. So let's repeat that. I would estimate that the pelvis is around this distance. So as earlier, it is facing downward. Make sure that when you draw a box, your lines are parallel. It's not going in this direction like that or like this. You know, you want to make sure that every line is parallel and go in the same direction. That's how you draw a box. Same direction, same direction, same direction, same direction. Then the same direction on the top side. Make sure everything's parallel. That's what it means. It's not going to converge because there is no convergence. We don't really want super intense foreshortening onto the hips. You don't want total convergence where it's like this, but you want some slight convergence when it comes to making a box because everything is in perspective. So most of it is kind of like similar to parallel lines, but not entirely. There's always some subtle differences. So now we have the box, and we have our weight. We can start blocking in our gesture now. So we have a cylinder connected to rib cage. In fact, I'm going to make this pelvis a bit small because this looks a bit too large. It's better. So I'm going to connect the rib cage with the pelvis. And when you do a curve like this, you can see that she has a bit of a curve to her, a bit of a, you know, kind of like a conjoining part. Sorry, the words are not right for me right now, but it kind of is a squished feeling. That's what it is. Sorry, this is such a simple term, but I'm like, you know. So think of a pillow or being even. This is what your rib cage and pelvis is doing. If you are going in this direction, this will start bending over and start making like a bean shape or pillow shape. If you have a pillowcase, you can always bend it forward and backward. It's always squished in some way or another. So if your rib cage and your pelvis are facing different directions, like one is more up and one is facing down like hers, you know, there's always a big squish when you bend your body around. So same goes with if your rib cage is in this direction and your pelvis is in this direction, it's facing upward. There's a big crease that happens to the figure. We want to keep that in mind when we're doing figures like this, to keep this to the side, so it's for further reference. In fact, I can make a small sheet of this later on, so I'm going to just make another layer of that, and I can make a sheet that if you guys need help with your gestures, you guys can look at it. So now let's draw the leg. Kind of see it bending. This is distributing the weight from the first leg. And then we can draw the arms. Now the hand is always around the thigh area, so be careful. Not making it too long up to here. This is where your kneecap is compared to the thigh, so always be aware of that. It's kind of like a landmark. Oh, I forgot, gotta connect this part of the pelvis, the rib cage. And let's block in this shape of the leg. Always give it some depth. Alright, so that is gesture number 2. Now let's go with third hardest, which is this one. This is more of a facing you direction. This pose is a little bit challenging compared to the other ones because there is some more movement, especially with the arms. Now once again we start with the cranium. Her head's looking straight at us. Start with the cranium and then make an egg shape, then draw the cross lines. It's fine if it's not perfect, you don't need to make it super tight. I mean, as you can see, my lines are very loose, they're kind of sketchy. So I just want you guys to mainly capture the essence of the pose. That's what gestures are. So once again, have the line of action. Sort of going around this way and then curving back with their hips to an S. And since both of her legs are carrying weight, it's fine. Actually, one leg is carrying more weight than the other. That is her right leg here, because her hips are facing this way. So the higher the hip is, the more weight it's putting on. So this is a relaxed leg on the left. So now let's put in the rib cage. Just a simple oval, not too big and not too small. Pelvis. Now her pelvis is sort of facing downward. So one way you can see is like these little dimples, this little ridge that appears on her hip is one sign to find out where your pelvis is. So it's facing downward a little bit. Because if it was facing upward, you would see the underneath of her crotch area, as well as more of like where her butt is, but you don't see that because it's facing down, so you want to take note of that. So it's tilting this way. A bit of top, you can see a little bit of that, not very much, but enough to know that it is facing down. And then you can indicate where her legs are. You want to keep the weighted one straight, and the second one sort of looser, so you can tell which one is the weighted one and which one is only supporting it. So now let's connect this, the neck, the cylinder. And we can connect the rest of her features here. It's curved, so you want to emphasize that. If you need any more help with gestures and stuff, you can look at the Vilpu manual, drawing manual. He talks all about gestures, and so I really recommend it. My figure drawing teacher, that is a really good animator, recommends that book a lot, and it really helped understand the movement of gesture, definitely a lot more. Now I'm going to edit the this drawing a bit because it looks way a bit off. You want to make sure that what's important is that you can follow the shapes well, so that your gesture can be filled in. Making this box a bit larger, wider actually, so it can fit that hip. But you definitely want to see that curve from her body. Make sure you also keep her legs straight as well. It's going straight down. And this one a little bit looser. You can kind of see that it is just kind of hanging off just a little bit. And then we can draw her arms. Make sure that her elbow isn't too long over here. It's right where her elbow or her rib cage ends. So it should be around here. And her arm reaches upward and then behind her head. In fact, I'm going to tilt this one more just to emphasize that more curved nature. So what also balances this pose is that one, her head is very straight, so it kind of keeps that like that nice balance of curved and straight. So her head is very straight. If you can see here, her head is straight, and then you have a diagonal curve, and it's straight again right here with her weighted leg. So it's kind of like straight, curve, and then curve, and then straight. So it's almost kind of like this pattern of movement involved in this gesture. You can definitely emphasize that a lot more with drawing, with the more you draw these gestures. Alright, so now let's move on to the last one, which is the most difficult one, and that one holds the most movement. So in this one, we have a different view of her head. We start with the head as always, but this time it's kind of a side view. So the side view, as I shown earlier, has this kind of circle as for the cranium and a mask that rests on top of it. And then you have the center line, and then you have, since she's looking down, your eye line will look like this. And now we can start with her neck, as well as her S line. So you can see that her torso goes this way, and then her hips go this way, and then her weighted leg goes straight down. Then you can kind of hint at the other leg going from the other side. So once more, we block in the rib cage. This tilted a little bit. Still a bit straight because it's facing in front. It's a bit tricky, especially with a gesture like this, but just make sure that it's facing front. And then her hips, her pelvis, you can kind of see the side view of her leg, but it's tilting downward, but tilted to this side. So it looks like that. And then her leg straight, as well as the other leg is kind of loose. Now we connect by drawing the neck connecting pelvis, okay, to the pelvis. And then sketching in the legs. So here that I'm also drawing this very sketchily. So here's a thigh, and then here's the calf. And then her feet are arched because she has heels on. So we gotta make sure of that. So you can already see the S-line, S-line, then that gesture is captured because of that gesture line. So it definitely makes the arm, the pose very fluid. Now you add the arms, just as little sticks. One is on her hip, and one is going up and behind her back and behind her head. So I'm going to compile all these gestures together. With this one here. With this one. Already moved, and then I'm going to take the first one and place it right here. So there you have it, four female gestures that capture the essence of curvature, as well as S-line and weight. So just a small recap, we always start with the head first, and then moving towards the gesture line. Then we block in our simple shapes like the rib cage and the pelvis, and then we connect that. And then after that we sketch in roughly the whole gesture with the legs as well, and then not really drawing the shoulders or anything, but we indicate where that's going to be. So we have the hands as well, and we know where our weight is. So in this gesture, our weight is on this right leg, and here on this left leg, here on the right leg again, and right leg. So you can already see the balance of these gestures. So anyways, I highly recommend you guys take, either these four images that I already have on this demo, and draw a bunch of gestures, or even pick out your own gestures as well. You can look on Pinterest or Google, type in figure drawing poses, photography, or something like that, or make sure that all these models that you're looking for are either nude or tightly dressed, so that shows the form. So yeah, and it definitely will help if you go to a live session. So yeah, anyways, let me know if you guys need any more help, and I hope that this video is also very helpful. Anyways, I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye bye.